My name is Tim Van Zolen, and I work for the Center for the Advancement of Christian Education. I'll talk a little bit about that, and then half of my position is I'm the chair of the education program at Dordt College, small private Christian college in northwest Iowa. Pretty similar to Cairn, actually, so it's fun to be on Cairn's campus here. When Paul asked me to share some thoughts about improvement or innovation and integration, I thought, sure, it'd be great to be able to facilitate such a discussion with people who are passionate about the same things that I am. There was probably a time when this was almost a taboo subject, though, in Christian schools, right? This idea of innovation or improvement, and for sure in Christian society. And now the White House even hosts faith-based social innovators conference on the front lawn. So times are changing. And it's improvement and innovation are probably a big reason the organization that I work for, CASE, exists. Our goal is really to become one node of a very connected network of Christian educators. So we'd like to connect with your schools. We like connecting to conferences like this. We just want to be able to help distribute the best ideas to schools so that together we can excel and pursue Christ and chase excellence in all that we do. When Paul sent me the title of the session, Improvement and Integration, I was immediately drawn to that little word and. And I'm glad Dr. Williams kind of opened it up last night a little bit, because that little coordinating conjunction can be very valuable, right? In how does the Schoolhouse Rock, hooking up words, phrases, and clauses, something like that? Yeah, conjunction, junction. It's a very valuable word, right? But I think it also makes an assumption. It makes an assumption that they can be independent. And I would argue, or I'll propose at least, that they can't be independent in our schools. And I think if we see them as two different things that we have to bring together, I think we're missing the point of what Dr. Williams talks about last night with Colossians, that in Christ all things are held together. So I'm not going to use the phrases separately very often, so I hope you'll allow me to do that. We also talk sometimes about the integration of faith and learning, and I would argue the same argument there, that those aren't separate. They shouldn't be separate. And in that case, should not be bringing those two things together, because they are together. They're inherently together. And it's the reason I choose your schools for my kids. I believe this is true in every Christian school that I've been a part of, that everything is strained through a biblical understanding of the Word of God. They know who they are and whose they are. Or as Case fellow Chad Dirksey sometimes says, schools that are intentionally developing a wisdom in students, a deepening understanding of what they have been saved from and what they have been saved for. And so again, I'm glad that Dr. Williams opened the door for that last night. Otherwise, this might have been a very short session. We're intentional about this model at Dordt College too, and I'm not trying to compete with Cairn. There's a disclaimer here. Paul and I share ideas about lots of things.
We both looked at the cross-app list.
Yeah, no one's looking at Cairn and looking at Dordt for a position. So I just want to share this model with you before I kind of roll into it. We call it the onion model. And there are lots of these types of models in schools, but we became exposed to this during an educational field trip to the Netherlands. We have a sister school in Zwolle, and they use it for their interview protocol following a teacher observation. We use it a bit differently at Dordt. We use it when they are applying to get into the teacher education program, or at what we would call level 1. So we have a conversation with students, and it's an exposure to get them to share a positive learning experience that they've had, and what behaviors the teacher did in order to create the learning environment that allowed them to have such a positive learning experience. So Dan, can I use you as a model for a minute? All right, so Dan's applying to get into our teacher education program, and I say, Dan, can you tell me about a specific positive learning experience that you had as a student? Go ahead, share one with us, Dan.
As a student, so we were allowed to do kind of an advanced show and tell.
Okay.
So I remember being intrigued, building models about jet planes, and I was able to take the jet plane in and explain how jet propulsion worked to my other 5th grade classmates.
Wow, that's very cool. So tell me a little bit about the learning environment. What was the context for learning there, Dan?
It was fairly traditional, yet there were avenues given to really kind of honor who you were as a person.
So what kinds of things did the teacher specifically do that allowed that to happen?
Well, she did this, for example. I remember her giving me other opportunities that that saw who I was.
Nice.
And allowed me to explore my gifts a bit.
Good. So what did she have to be good at? What did she have to be competent at as a teacher to allow this experience to happen?
She was not a touchy-feely teacher by any means. I mean, she was a tough teacher. She developed really good competencies in us, but at the same time, she also, I think, saw each individual what they needed.
Good.
And worked on that.
So how would she answer the question, I believe that children, how might she finish that sentence?
It's been a long time since 5th grade.
That's okay. I'm going to skip to the next one then. What was her identity? How did you know her? How would you describe her?
She was scary.
That's okay. That's all right.
I mean, she was very firm. She was tough, but yet I probably felt love, even though she wasn't a real
Touchy-feely,
person,
yeah.
because it was the beliefs that she operated on. Obviously and she was ahead of her time. She was a very she did innovative things that today come out again in different language that I look back and say, wow, she was doing that back then.
Nice. And how would you describe her mission? Sometimes we call this core values or world and life view. Could you maybe draw some things out from that experience that could describe her worldview? And you don't have to answer that question.
Yeah,
but that's the process we go on.
She firmly believed in us as image bearers, I think.
Good. So that would be one of her core values. Or,
yeah, absolutely.
so that's the process we go through with, and these are level 1 students, right? So they're not as eloquent as Dan, so we have to prompt with quite a few other questions too. But that's the process we go through to try and help them see how this core value system manifests itself out in the teaching and learning environment. So this is an integrated understanding of who they are and whose they are and what it looks like in the learning environment. At round 2, before they get ready to go to student teach, we do the same process again, and now they have to tell us about a time when they taught a lesson. And it could be a positive or negative experience, and how did it shape itself, or how did it manifest in the learning environment. And again, we work our way down to, can they articulate that mission? So I've done this with in-service teachers too, and I think it's a very good exercise. If they can't articulate that core value system, how are they able to integrate it, right? How do we know that they're integrated? I can walk into a classroom, I can see some things, but I want to know why I'm seeing what I'm seeing. So that's just one of the models that we use in the program. But our goal really is to understand, for our students to understand, what's at the center of their being, and how does that end up showing itself in the classroom, in the teaching and learning environment. So we try to avoid actually using that phrase, the integration of faith and learning, because we want them to see that it hasn't been disintegrated, like Dr. Williams said last night. So, all right, moving on. First 20 years or so of marriage, my wife hated to cook. And as you can see, I'm not suffering or malnourished by any means. But she didn't enjoy cooking at all. And don't get me wrong, or let her know that I'm sharing this little truth. I love her completely and infinitely. She is an incredible mom to our 3 kids. She's a much better teacher than I am. If you come to Sioux Center, you're welcome to come to our house, and we'll make sure you get a good meal. But she's a fantastic teacher, and she really understands who she's teaching, God's image in the form of first graders. And she loves what she teaches. She has a joy of sharing how to read, how to learn to read, that open up an incredible world of real and imaginary for kids. And then the challenge of puzzles and shapes and sizes and mathematics, and figuring out what happens when you drop a Mento into a 2-liter bottle of Coke, or biting a wintergreen in pitch darkness, right? So she loves those things. But for Jill, cooking means finding a recipe to follow. 3 tablespoons of this, half a cup of that, stir it up, put it in the oven for 2 hours at 350, and then serve it. And then listen to, kids complain or get one of these looks, right? Oh, this is too spicy, not enough flavor, too firm, too mushy, all those kinds of things. And it's really no wonder then that she doesn't enjoy cooking, because it's a mundane work for her. That's algorithmic. It's lacking in creativity, and it really has few rewards. So Let me read that last line again to you, right? Mundane work that's algorithmic, lacking in creativity, and few rewards. Does it sound like any other work that you're familiar with? Some classrooms, it might be, right? And so that is part of the reason why I think we need to really think hard about what does it mean to be innovative, or what does it mean to continuous improvement in our classrooms. Does my teaching look like I'm just following a recipe? And there are some really bad recipes out there. Some must have been created by people who really, either didn't care or didn't know what tastes good or how to mix things together. This one actually has processed meat in a Jell-O mold. The celery makes it a little crunchy, and then there's a boiled egg in there that makes it a little bit more slimy than the Jell-O mold, right? What do you think about that? I don't. That's for lunch today, by the way, too. So, no, I'm just kidding. They're fantastic. Cairn's awesome. That was good food we had last night, too. So. Unfortunately, a picture like this makes me think a little bit about when I first started teaching middle school mathematics, unfortunately. I taught from an old Saxon textbook, and I'm not blaming Saxon for this, but their textbook was designed with questions 1 through 30 in it. It's due tomorrow, I'll show, and you go, right? That was my lesson plan for the first year of teaching. Lesson 31, 1 through 30, I show and you go. It makes me a little sad to think about those days. When I would introduce myself to someone, said, we'd have that first conversation, second round, so what do you do? I'd say, well, I'm a math teacher, middle school math teacher. And they say, oh, that's when I started to hate math. And I'm not surprised if my method of teaching math was the way that they saw. So like a bad recipe, poor teaching can certainly leave a bad taste in the mouth of our students. So after a couple rounds of this, I had a chance to attend the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics Convention in Palm Springs. And my eyes were open to some exciting ways to teach algebra and geometry, which was what I was teaching at that time. But the best thing that happened during that conference was I had a great conversation with a crusty old math teacher over lunch. And I shared with him my love for teaching students, my enjoyment of some of the great moments that I get to experience with middle school students. But I also shared with him those great moments usually didn't occur in my math classroom. And he kind of laughed at me for a while. And then he shared a similar story of his induction to the math classroom. We ended up missing a session so he could kind of share with me how good it can be once I found pleasure in what was happening in my math classroom. And I don't know if he was a Christian or not, but I could peel the onion and I could go back to the point where I could say, I think many of his core values were similar to mine. The difference was his were being manifested in the learning environment and mine were not. So he did help me figure out why my math classroom wasn't a pleasurable experience for either me or the students. Why it made both of us say, right? Algorithms. For example, when teaching students how to multiply fractions, I remember using the phrase, maybe you've heard this, for yours is not to reason why, just invert and multiply. How about that, right? Don't think too deeply about it, just do it this way. I have a core value of acknowledging that students are uniquely gifted by God and have an incredible ability to learn. I was not providing opportunities for them to do that. I just wanted them to answer the question correctly. There was really little room for failure. There was no research process going on. There wasn't a scientific method happening. I have a core value that we reflect the Creator, and we're created to be creative. Sir Ken Robinson has a great TED Talk on this. You've maybe seen that. I love the story where he talks about when you ask in kindergarten, who is the greatest artist in the class? Where do they point? At themselves, right? He goes back in third grade, who's the greatest artist in the class? Not me anymore, right? So schools have killed creativity, he says, by third grade. And I was killing it in mathematics. Not killing it in a good way either. Killing it. Abstract. Just like a single well-prepared dish does not make a meal. Why do we continue to teach isolated courses in 42 minutes? We stop the learning experience on a dime when that bell rings. When do students get to see the connectedness of creation in our schools? And I'm speaking probably specifically right now to the middle school environment that I was in, or a high school environment. Knowing how to measure ingredients doesn't really make you a good cook. Just like knowing how to do algebra doesn't make you a good quantitative reasoner. Yet we spend a lot of time doing algebra instead of thinking quantitatively. Last one, would you let your farmer be your chef? maybe sometimes, it might be some instances where you would. But in general, their expertise is in the wrong place. The majority of people who teach middle school mathematics are not really mathematicians. And how many of our middle school math teachers in Christian schools would be considered math integration specialists, integration in the way that we're using it in this conference? They're great people who love kids and maybe love how to teach, but is that really enough? So I needed to improve, and I needed to improve for a lot of reasons. But one reason I need to improve is because the competition is really good. Here's some of the competition.
Dad, what's up? What are you doing here?
Madden football season in America is a competitive time, an emotional time, an annual ritual that causes this man to put hands on this pretty face.
Madden season is the reason my hand touched your face. That time of year is finally here when I put you in your place. Man, I kill your car.
Was that too far?
How about sugar in your tape?
Did I do that?
I'll get inside that cranium, live there all night long. I'll wake you up with a boat on. I can crack it on.
It's Madden season. Don't ask why. Time to man up, not to cry. It's Madden season. It can break you up. So beat your rival. Don't give up.
Baby, don't go.
Damien?
It's Madden season, the most physical time of year. I will bet you, pick you, hit you. There's no rival that I fear. Oh, yes, it's Madden season. Let's go run defensive play. I'll lock you in, hit you again, and burn you back for done.
If you wanna have some fun, then you can play it to your numb. Nothing but the Rockets. Beat number one.
Yeah, you can't just keep showing up.
Get off me, Richard.
It's Madden season. It'll break your heart. To beat your rival, you gotta be smart. It's Madden season. There ain't no rules. Can someone please help me get out of this pool?
It's Madden season. Go start a Twitter war. You can smack talk, trash talk, bang down that door. I will own you with my strategy. I will write the check your face, take cash. Hey, Dave! Dave! I'm gonna pay for the car. Got a little bit of daylight here. Touchdown!
Oh boy, that was just bad tackling. That was awful.
Oh, so we playing for real? Dave, I'm asking, are we playing for real?
Yo, Dave, your house is on fire.
Let it burn.
Your house is on fire.
Let it burn!
All right.
That's my boy! He don't care about this house! Madden NFL 15. Rated E for everyone. EA Sports. It's in the game.
That's pretty tough. That's pretty tough competition, isn't it? Does the King's Academy have a video like this on the front page? No. It's crazy, right? That's crazy competition that we're up against. We're not competing against the other school or the public school or the other private school down the street. We're competing against the culture that these kids are I think Todd Williams, they said they're swimming in it, right? They're swimming in this culture, and that's our competition. So, and I don't think we need to shy away from it, right? The word compete comes from this Latin word to strive or to contend for, and that's what we're contending for, the imagination and the attention of our kids. So back to middle school mathematics for a minute. So I needed to go from to right? Yeah. Yeah, I wish. You wouldn't want to hear that. The best I could do was I'll start all my words with A, okay? So the first thing I needed to do was adjust. because I think students need the opportunity to do things wrong in terms of not following the standard algorithm. For example, I never would have known that they love doing multiplication with the Russian peasant algorithm. Who would have known that? I wouldn't have, because I was only teaching the standard algorithm. They loved getting a quiz back with some incorrect responses. Figure that one out. Because I gave them the chance to work with a friend, do it, turn it back into me, get full credit. And why not? They showed me they can do it, they understand, they know why. The next one, articles, again, I just needed a word with the word A, but I wanted them to read and write math stories, right? I wanted them to do some real work. Now, most of it had to do with sports and shopping for middle school students, but that was okay, because this is an area where I can provide prompts in that are going to flush out biblical themes like justice and stewardship, much more than questions 1 through 30 in the Saxon textbook did. I needed to get them to think beyond M&Ms for probability and for Hershey bars for fractions, to think about how big creation is and how we can express this numerically, and God's given us the gift to do that. We can use math in powerful ways to understand the world around us, how economics is a gift from God, to become financially literate so they could be good stewards of what God has given them and bless others. Students need more than one voice. They need math experts and quantitative reasoners that are going to come into the classroom. The textbook author is one voice, there's no doubt about that. But it was real people who came into my classroom to challenge them to think deeply about the implications of math. Financial advisors to talk about the magic of compounding. City planners who shared their faith, how their faith informs how they make decisions about resources. Economic experts who understand the laws of supply and demand, knowing that we can serve an all-sustaining God. Different role models that use math every day and can share this in the context of the vocational calling that God has given to them. To be an artisan, you need to practice the craft, not just follow the recipe. You need the opportunity to start over when necessary to get the product that you want. You need to go at a pace that can work for you, not simply the speed that's found by taking the lowest student and the highest student and hitting the middle. And hard work. I can't sacrifice pushing my students to work hard by making it easy. I know I had middle school students who could have done numbers 1 through 30 without me showing them at the beginning of class. Recipes are easy to follow and don't require the creative and critical thinking that we want our students to develop. Is there a substitute? Mike Rowe says yes. We've all heard the phrase, work smart, not hard. Mike says, and this is where we can use the and, right? The conjunction. Work smart and hard. Bring those two things together in your classroom and see what students can do. So these changes allowed my students to see math more, but more importantly to think, think, and do math in innovative ways, ways that I could tangibly show them who God is, how He's at work in the world around us, what He's calling us to do through the gift of mathematics. We went to construction sites to participate in their work, experienced the geometry needed to build walls and lay foundations, and then these partners turned around and helped us build a snack shack for middle school students, which allowed us to learn about business practices, sales and purchasing, marketing, price points, which eventually led to a profit. And that permitted us to install a misting system. We were in Southern California, remember. So our lunch was all outside, so we put in a misting system. Kids loved it. They took the project from proposal to the board all the way to implementation. In short, we innovated. I like this definition from Elliot Washer, who's a co-founder of the Big Picture Learning in a school in Rhode Island called the Met Center. There's a couple lines I highlighted that I really appreciate. First different and then better. That's an important one for me to think about when we're innovating at Dordt College or when we're helping schools innovate through CASE. Are there ways that we can do it differently? And not that we have to do it differently, but are there ways that we can do it differently? If we can, let's try them out. Let's try it and then let's see if it's better. We can't be afraid, we can't be frustrated by change, we have to give it a shot. And then the last one, I appreciate that he's questioning the box in which we operate, which we often talk about, outside the box thinkers. But innovate as well inside the box, right? How do you, we have a box, and I think we'll always have a box in schools. The box is defined by lots of different parameters, by state rules, by finances, by facilities. How do we think more creatively inside that box than what we have been in the past and not be confined by the fact that we are in a box? So I think a strategic plan for innovative thinking is going to include these 4 things, these 4 areas specifically. Notice on the bottom, I started a Today's Meet. If you've used that before, you know what I'm talking about, but it's kind of like just an online conversation board. So if you have a device with you and you want to load that up, that would be great, because one of the greatest values of conferences, I think, like these are the coffee times usually, right? When you get a chance to sit down and talk to somebody who does the same thing you do, but in a different way, and you get some great ideas. So if you want to use that site, and at any time, if you want to throw up, hey, here's a way that we innovate with teachers, or that we innovate with students, or that we innovate in our schools or in our communities, put your name in there, share your best idea so that we can all take it back to our schools. I don't think any of us are competing against one another. We're competing against culture, and we want to strive to get that attention and imagination of our kids. So that will be up for a week or as long as you need it to be, so please keep adding to it. And this is part of my reason for being here too with CASE, because we want to be able to find great ideas and share them with other schools. Put that out on our website. I'm not here to promote CASE by any means, but go to that website, go to todaysmeet.com, share your best ideas, and if we see something that we think is fantastic, we're probably going to contact you and say, hey, would you be willing to write a piece on that and share it on the CASE website? Because we want schools to improve and innovate, and we want to connect them. So teachers, let's start with that one. How does your school create a culture of innovation for teachers? Unity Christian High School is a pretty small school, Northwest Iowa. I serve as board member there. We have about 275 students in grades 9 through 12. We're a 1-to-1 school, actually probably more like 2-to-1, like most of your schools, right? Every kid has a smartphone in their pocket as well. We went to a modified block, so we've been doing some innovation at the school. When you ask teachers to change, what's the first thing they say? No, you're right.
What I'm doing is fine.
Yep. And why don't they want to change? Because they don't have?
They're comfortable.
Yeah, they're comfortable. I hear we don't have time, right? There's not enough time in the day to do the things that you're already asking me to do, and now to try something differently. Because typically, we forget to take things away. And so one of the innovations that we're trying at Unity is those teachers are teaching 6 out of 8 periods. We have an 8-period day. So they have 2 to 3 preps, and then they monitor 1 study hall. So they really have 1 preparatory period during the day. So we took away the prep period. I'm sorry, we took away the study hall. Wow. Was that a Freudian slip or what? We took away all the prep periods. We went to a 10-hour school day. We took away the study hall. Because why would we pay, 1/8 of whatever a typical employee costs, maybe $70,000. We're paying, $10,000 for that person to monitor a study hall. We found a retired school teacher, a beautiful woman, who said she'll do it for $10 an hour. She'll probably donate it all back to the school. We opened up the library. We don't have walls in the library anymore. You have these learning commons in your schools too. All the students go there for study hall. Now teachers have 2 prep periods. 1 prep period we ask them to work specifically on, we'll be asking them to work on teaching for transformation units. Maybe you've heard of that, through lines, things like that. It's a biblical framework that we're trying to use at Unity Christian. So time is a big one, right? So we have to be able to find time for innovation to happen. That's part of creating that culture of innovation within our schools. I heard about another school this week that is going away from study halls altogether. They're just having 1 extended lunch period, which I think is a great idea too. So rather than having study halls, everybody has basically the same study hall. You eat lunch in it, you relax a little bit. All the teachers are off during that time as well. Off, meaning that they can do work, or students can go to them and get individual assistance as needed. Everybody's available at the same time. Student groups can meet. It's kind of like a community block hour, right? So the whole community takes this hour off, and we have time to do things together. It's a pretty neat idea. I'm anxious to see how it goes. Maybe some of your schools are doing that already. If you are, make sure you let us know on that Today's Meet site. Student innovation. It's happening right here, right? If you notice the other side of where we're staying, there's a ton of students over there in that MICA conference. That's an incredible deal. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Some of you I know took students here. Here's what I pulled off the website. The MICA conference is completely student-led, focuses on empowering youth to create social change in their communities. They take the name from the prophet Micah, who urged God's people, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you?" You know the rest of that, right? Their view on social justice is restorative, transformative, and based in Christian theology. This means that they not only focus on community service projects, but also on discussing what social justice truly is, how we can create long-lasting transformation. Some of you know Dr. Chen, Dr. Mike Chen. He helped get that project off the ground. But if I understand it correctly, it's completely student-run. They do it themselves. It's students innovating. They're fighting for clean water in Africa. They are partnering with Starlight Ministries on care for the homeless. They sponsor 6 students to go to private Christian schools in Nepal. Talk about a worldview in action. It has implications and applications for them. Another cool display just happened down the road in Hartford, Connecticut last week. It's called the Student Innovation Conference. Look at this one. These are 9th graders, by the way. You can see their worldview here. It's very present. This is a public school. Here's another one, X-Text. How about that? They're identifying problems that their community, their population sees, right? Texting and driving. So they're creating something that won't allow you to, I'm a little curious as to how that would work, but that's pretty cool. So it's happening right around us. These are 9th graders. They're doing real work for a real need within a real audience. Innovative schools. You may have heard about a national deeper learning network, and this is something Dan's passionate about with CASE. There's more than 500 schools in 41 states who are serving as a source of innovation and tools for delivering knowledge. A mix of charter schools and public schools right now. I don't think there's a ton of Christian schools in it, maybe just 1 or 2. Each network has a unique approach to delivering deeper learning. They're united in fostering educational outcomes that prepare young people for what the public school is looking for, what the public is looking for, economic and civic success. We have a different orientation, right? We have a different teleological orientation than this group is going to have. Not that we can't be a part of it, but we have a different goal for the students that attend our schools. So we need to be part of this group in some ways, but we also need to extend beyond it. So you've heard of some of these probably. High Tech High, Connect Ed, Ed Vision, Expeditionary Learning, the New Tech Network. All these are part of this deeper learning network. I'm fascinated when schools describe themselves with these types of terms, almost a way of being, right? This is who we are as a school. We're a high-tech high. We're an expeditionary. We're an EL school. How do we describe ourselves as Christian schools? What's our catchphrase? What's our deeper learning that we want to talk about with students? I think we're pretty crystal clear on what it should be. Deuteronomy 6 tells us this, right? We listen to God, we love Him alone, and then we leave that legacy. We write it on the door frames of our schools. CASE hopes to be a part of networking Christian schools who want to do this really well and who are continually pursuing God and chasing excellence in all that they do. And then the last one, innovative communities. I think there's too many Christian schools that I've come across that forget that we're called to be part of the community outside of our 4 walls. We like to market the fact that our schools are full of community. Come join the Unity community. Come join the Cairn or Dort community. And that's an important part of what we're called to do as well. But we're also called to be much more than that. I certainly hope that's true, but here, let me give you an example from Unity Christian. We just built a $5 million performing arts building. It's a beautiful building. Our number 1 donor was the city. They gave us $750,000 for this building. We wouldn't have been able to build it without them. For certainly, we wouldn't have been able to build it the size that we did. It's a 750-seat theater. The city has it for 25 days a year. They put on a week-long production during what's called Tulip Time in Orange City. But it's a fantastic example of being part of this community. We could have both built separate ones. We built one together, right? We're sharing it. We're solving problems with a pencil, not with lots of dollars. That might not happen in your community, but I think it can. And I think we have to make the first step rather than waiting until they come to us for such a request. So our next event, or our next building that we're doing with the city is a athletic, like a gym, right? A community gym. So we're building 3 gyms and all the weights and things like that. In that building will be a dance studio, there'll be a physical therapy office, and we'll be able to use it for practices because we currently just have 1 gym, so we've got kids coming at 5:30 in the morning to practice, right? So there's lots of things that we can do, that we can innovate if we think differently and then better about what we're doing. One of the beautiful things about the Performing Arts Center, though, is that those 25 days when the city has it, we're not out of the building. Our students are valet parkers for those events, which is a little scary, right? Our students are ushers, our students do the sound and lighting technician, and we offer that as being part. This is what it means to be part of the community. How does innovation happen? You've probably seen this theory before. It's from Everett Rogers back in 1962. It follows the normal curve, right? The normal bell curve. We have, and maybe you can even think about your own school at this point. There are probably some people in your school in that 2.5%. They're the ones that constantly have ideas. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but they're constantly throwing ideas at you. Then you have a group that are considered the early adopters, right? They'll jump on that bandwagon and they'll start playing right away. The early majority are the ones that wait to see if it's working. The late majority are the last ones to get on, and then the laggards, they don't participate, right? They're the anchors. And that's not always bad to be a laggard, I'll say that, because sometimes there are bad ideas, right? And somebody has to say, hey, that's just really not a very good idea. We're not going to do it. I'm not sure that happens too often. Too often the laggards, I think, are the anchors that are holding the progress back. And then you can see the S-curve that's superimposed over top of that. And that's that, think about technologies when they're introduced, right? They have a kind of a slow start, then they have a rapid increase, and then they kind of plateau out when they get to full market share. So this is, Simon Sinek talks about this in a TED Talk too, which is really good. And he talks about how this is pretty true in innovation across the board, whether it be business, schools, technologies, things like that. He says there's a tipping point or a chasm right around that 14 to 16%. And if you can get past that, chances are your idea is going to make it. If you can't, usually the idea dies out. But it's good for us to know when we think about innovations as school leaders, right? And I'm lumping you all into that category of school leaders. That's why you're here. Whether you're a school head or a lead teacher or whatever role you play at the school, you're here because you're a school leader. So you can keep this in mind, because I think like an early adopter model for a lot of new ideas is really wise to do. It doesn't get 68% of the people who might get on board right away, but you might be able to figure out a few things in that early adopter stage that you wouldn't figure out if you just rolled it out to the whole school at one time. And choose wisely on those early adopters. They don't always have to be in that 13%. Maybe you choose one that's there, and an early majority, a late majority, and choose a laggard to be on that group and see how this is going to roll out over the course of a year. If I go back to our competition, right? I could put them into categories as well too. There's going to be the people who play this game, the people who watch this game, and then the people who never play the game at all. I would probably be in the early adopter because, unfortunately, I love video games, and that's because my son and I, we love playing all the new Madden games and things like that. So it's a great time for us to play together. We're ultra competitive at it, and because he beats me if we play outside. So I have to play inside now to beat him. So how do we do it? Forgive the Nike slogan here, but it's one that I've appreciated since 1988, even though the origin of it isn't very good. I won't tell you about it, but someday you might want to look that up. Just do it. First one is, I think, just do it yourself. As a school leader, I think you have to be an innovator. Educational innovators or entrepreneurs fit into this category. They avoid this paralysis by analysis, right, which we see often in schools, and believe me, it's in colleges like you wouldn't believe. One example for your consideration, think about the rise of the MOOC, right? The massive open online courses. 1969 was when this started, the Open University in the United Kingdom. They started to think about distance education, what had been known as distance education, and what it could be. And while distance education, I think, is still alive and well, I was in South Africa at the beginning of the year. The University of South Africa has 450,000 students. 450,000 students. Can you imagine? If you're teaching there, you have 3,000 students in your class. And they do it all by mail, back and forth. Can you imagine what happened when the post office went on strike for 3 months? Right? Your whole life shuts down. Your whole system shuts down. But anyway, distance education is still alive and well. But the MOOC actually has really, I think, innovated us in a way, and you can maybe go back and think about where it's at on that S-curve as well. You could take a course this month. There were 220 courses that you could take this month. You could take a course on Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus, or you could take a course on computational neuroscience from Cal Berkeley. So it's amazing what's out there right now, right? This is an innovation where I can do it myself now. I can continue to learn because this is available to me. Just do it now. When you think about the immediacy that's rampant in society because of tweets, snaps, vines, or whatever the social media is, that immediacy is motivating and it's reinforcing. Does anyone have an Apple Watch by chance? I'm fascinated as to when those things come out and become probably more affordable for our population. But what's that's going to do? Because the science is kind of supporting this right now. So when we view a social media request, and you can think about it yourself when you have your phone with you and it goes off, right? That releases this dopamine that rewards the social media. It causes an increase in motivation as well as a place in our working and long-term memory. And I really think that's what these, things like the Apple Watch are going to do in the future. It's going to demand that from our students. It's going to take that, capture their attention. Lillian Katz, she's an early education expert. She talks about this just-in-time learning experiences, which we talk about in schools too. And we know the value of those, right? That's a horizontal relevance versus just in case, right? You need to learn this just in case you might need it someday versus just in time. Do it with friends. And I think this has relevance for both students and for teachers. Innovation rarely happens when we stay in our caves. We need to be part of learning networks, learning communities. And we have the ability to choose our own collaborators now like never before, right? You could have a personal learning network that includes Robert Marzano, Charles Glenn, Michael Fullen, Dan Behrens, Carol Ann Tomlinson, Rick Warren, Bruce Lockerbie, Diane Ravitch, Tom Vander Ark, right? You can have whoever you want in your learning network, who's ever going to stimulate you to be an innovator in your classroom. Do it for fun. Work was meant to be joy-filled before and after the fall. Being called to participate in the restoration process, that should be enough to stimulate and motivate our work every day. Think about your best work experiences. My guess is that most of them were done with a sense of playfulness and enjoyment in what you did. Think back to the competition, the world of gaming. While it has been the downfall of many a young college student, especially males, due to the newfound freedom they experience in college, one can hardly argue that serious gaming has not flourished. Gaming combines enjoyment with a unique challenge. Seymour in a paper entitled "Does Easy Do It?" provided some great color commentary on the world of gaming. He began by being somewhat critical on those who seek to control children. He refers to them as the less imaginative members of our profession, or parents obsessed with kids' grades, and how they become green with envy when they see the energy that kids are putting into gaming. And so they decide to make games that teach multiplication, thinking that their software is so much fun that kids don't even know they're learning. Good try, right? What's best about the contribution of game designers to the learning environment is that they replace what is worst about the current curriculum with the best about game design. Gaming draws kids into some very, very hard learning. If you don't believe that, just try some of the games that are out there on the market, some of the popular games, not the educational games. So what can you do as a school leader to create this culture of innovation at your school? Integrated innovation. First one, I think you need to be one of the why guys or the why gals. I don't think school leaders always have to be the innovators, but they have to for sure be the stimulators, right? They have to kick the fire a little bit to make sure that it's still burning. Why can't we do this different and better? And if we can't, that's good, but at least we asked the question and we answered it. Why parent-teacher conferences? Why not student-parent-teacher conferences? And if so, why, right? Answer these questions. Why do we celebrate academic achievement in such a way that honors only those who have reached a certain percentage in a way that ranks students? Does that fit our core values? Does that fit who we are? If I go back to the center of that onion. Why is Apple so innovative? What can we learn from them? Aren't they just a computer company like Dell or HP? Are they really going to come out with a car? Have you heard this? There's rumors that they're in the transportation business now. Why did Martin Luther King Jr. lead the civil rights movement? Why him? Was it because he had a plan? No, he had a dream, right? Why do we follow people? We have to ask those questions. Simon Sinek says we have to think, act, and communicate differently. We have to be able to answer the question of why. We can all answer the question of what and how to do it, but why are we doing it? This gets to the heart of why we exist as a Christian school. This is the core belief. This is the mission. This is the worldview that we want to instill in the lives of our kids. So the how is how we fulfill that belief, and the what is what we do, right? It sounds simple, but what Simon Sinek found is that even companies do this backwards. They start with the what, and then they move to the how, and they almost forget about the why, or they neglect it. He says not Apple. Apple starts with the why. It's the core of their marketing and driving force behind their business operations. To illustrate this point, he asks us to imagine if Apple started backwards by creating a marketing message that started with what. So here's what he says. We make great computers. They're user-friendly, beautifully designed, and easy to use. Do you want to buy one? These facts are true, but we might not be sold yet. We could buy a Dell or an HP, probably a little bit cheaper, or any number of other computers. We want to know why they are great and why they are user-friendly. Turns out Apple has figured that out over years and knows that better than anyone else in that market. Here's their real marketing. Everything we do, we aim to challenge the status quo. We think to aim differently. Our products are user-friendly, beautifully designed and easy to use. We just happen to make great computers. Do you want to buy one? See how different that feels. It's language, but it's also what we see in the marketplace today. They start with the why when they define their company. We need to start with the why when we define what's going to drive our schools. They're able to attract customers with fundamental beliefs about who they are as a company. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Because they have other options. They have options down the street from you. Starting with a why makes Apple more than just a computer company selling features, and that's why their products have flourished while their other competitors have flopped. Think of, remember when the iPod came out? What was the competition for the iPod? Yeah. Is it still around? I don't think so either, right? It didn't happen, right? And then they went to the iPhone. Does iPhone have the market share right now? It doesn't. Samsung actually does. The Galaxy 6 sells more than the iPhone, but you sure hear a lot more about the iPhone, don't you? Because they think, act, and communicate differently as a company. What else can we do? This phrase has hit me a couple times over the last month. So my wife just graduated with her master's degree last month, and we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. It's actually today, so we're not together. I know that is kind of sad, isn't it? Thank you. But we did go down to a resort for a week, and we had a good time. So don't feel bad for us. But when we were down there, everybody who was on staff in that resort used this phrase, "My pleasure." It's my pleasure. When they would serve you, when they would help you find something, we'd say thank you, and they would say, "It's my pleasure." So after the second day of this, I thought, I'm going to really find out. Is it their pleasure, or they just have to say this, right? So I'm talking to some of the staff, and I said, "Is it really?" When they'd say, "It's my pleasure." And some of them would laugh and smile at me. But one young lady said, "Yes, it really is my pleasure." She said, "I'm here to make sure that you have a very enjoyable experience while you're on vacation. So it is my pleasure to do the work that I'm being asked to do here." And I thought that's pretty cool. That's pretty authentic, right? As a school leader, it should be our pleasure to help our students, faculty, communities, and schools innovate. It makes me also think about, maybe you remember this scene from Chariots of Fire when Eric Liddell is talking about, "When I run, I feel God's pleasure." And I think when you facilitate this culture of innovation, you're going to see people who are very excited about what they're doing. And you should be able to feel God's pleasure because you're doing the work that you've been asked to do. And I think we need to expect change. We know we live in a culture that is continuously moving. It's going fast. If we stop, we could get left behind, which is a scary thing. Some people say, well, actually our president says 10%. I need 10% change from you every year. And I have to show him in the courses that I teach and the work that I do that I'm kind of being innovative, at least in 10% of my job. And he says, not more than that, because I don't, he says he kind of likes 10% as this magic number. And I don't know if it's a magic number as much as it is just a conscious effort that I'm thinking about. What am I doing new, differently, and better than I had been doing in the past? So let me wrap this up. I actually love to cook. And my wife and I love cooking together. It's a time where we can just do it together, right? We can be innovative in the kitchen. We can try new variations. We can fail. We can start over. We can have a lot of fun. Ironically enough, one of the students in my first middle school math classrooms has become a very, very good chef. He went to the California Culinary Institute in San Francisco and now works in Palm Springs at a fancy restaurant there. So we were back there last summer, and he invited us to come to the restaurant. And he made us a meal that I can't even begin to describe. And he sat down with us afterward, and he said, I just asked him, I said, do you enjoy what you do? And he said, oh, you can't imagine. He said, baking, that's chemistry. But he said, A-A-A-A-H, cooking, that's creativity. So let's throw out some of the cookbooks that we've been using and make some real chefs, not fast food workers. They deserve the images. They deserve this as images of Christ, and they are created to be creative. So maybe the goal is not to turn out to be everyone to be a 5-star chef, but let's move the innovation needle a little bit in our schools so that our schools, our teachers, our students, and our communities can experience the difference between a rich, smooth Gouda and Velveeta. So I think integrated innovation is personal and it's communal. And I hope that your schools foster such a culture. I like Bill Gates' description of being an impatient optimist, because I think this can happen in schools. And I think we have to have a similar mindset as we teach and lead, that we pursue Christ and we chase excellence in all that we do in our schools. So thank you for your kind attention. I think we have a little bit of time if you have questions or if you want to continue to contribute to that site. I would love for that. Or if you just have comments, I'd love to hear your comments too on things that you're doing in your schools that are innovative.